What's up, everyone? On today's episode, we set our sights on the 2010 3D computer-animated action-adventure fantasy film produced by DreamWorks Animation, How to Train Your Dragon. The film is a story of protagonist Hiccup, a Viking who was thought to be useless and weak by everyone, including his own father.
The Viking community, however, did not know that brilliance was in him. He is unusual for a Viking, not only physically, being very thin and seemingly weak, but also intellectually, as he thinks before he acts and is abnormally clever.
He's one of the only people ever to understand and be able to speak Dragonese, the language of the dragons.
Hiccup is also a very good sword fighter, unique that he is left-handed, and the best Viking hero that ever lived.
Although an intelligent and quiet boy, he was picked on the most by the bullies, but eventually shows them that he's a capable leader.
Throughout his odyssey, we get to witness as he overcomes great obstacles on his journey of becoming a hero.
The hard way.
The success of an animated feature film often relies heavily on the cast of voice actors hired to represent each character.
And this film is no exception. Jay Baruchel, who voices the lead character Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III, is the awkward son of Stoic the Vast.
Baruchel, incidentally, was born in Ottawa, Ontario, and grew up in NDG, a Montreal neighborhood and a stone throw away from our very own Devious Advocacy studio.
Gerard Butler, as Stoic the Vast, Hiccup's dad, is the chieftain of the island they reside on named Burke.
Craig Ferguson, the British-American television show host of The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, stars as Gobber the Belch, Burke's blacksmith, a close friend of Stoic and teacher of the tribe's young dragon training recruits.
America Ferrera, as Astrid Hofferson, is Hiccup's fellow student in dragon training, not to mention his crush.
And Astrid.
Christopher Mintz-Plasse as Fishlegs Ingerman, an enthusiastic youth knowledgeable in dragon lore, which he often relates in role-playing game style.
The hideous Zippleback.
Plus 11 stealth times 2.
The monstrous nightmare.
Firepower 15.
The terrible terror.
Attack 8, Venom 12.
Can you stop that?
Jonah Hill as Snotlout Jorgensen, one of Hiccup's dragon training classmates. Snotlout is brash, overconfident, and fairly unintelligent, but reliable.
T.J. Miller of Deadpool fame and Kristen Wiig, who appear as Tough Nut and Rough Nut Thorsten, a pair of quarrelsome twins.
And to round out the cast, we have David Tennant in the role of Spitelout, Snotlout's father.
Normally when recording voice actors, the filmmakers will usually bring in every actor individually and have them record their dialogue by themselves.
But in this case, the directors made sure to cash in on the improv abilities of the secondary cast, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, Jonah Hill, Kristen Wiig, and T.J. Miller, by frequently bringing them all together in a single recording session.
Some might suggest this is poorly conceived.
The origins of the film lay in the book series written by Christina Cowell.
Cowell, an award-winning British children's author, grew up in London but spent the better part of the spring and most of her summers on a small, uninhabited island off the west coast of Scotland.
And it was during that time spent as a child on the Inner Hebrides where she first began to develop her writing and drawing talents.
Cowell cites the Scottish Inner Hebrides Islands and stories of Scandinavian Scotland as inspirations for the book.
By the time she was 8, her family had built a small stone house on the island.
The house was lit only by candlelight, and there was no telephone or television, so she spent a lot of time drawing and writing stories.
It was those stories that caught the attention of executives at DreamWorks Animation in 2004.
Producer Bonnie Arnold, coming off her success in Over the Hedge, became interested in the newly acquired property. She kept the project on her radar as time went on, and when DreamWorks Animation co-president of production Bill Damashki asked her what she wanted to work on next, she chose How to Train Your Dragon.
In initial development, the plot followed the original novel very closely, but about halfway through production, Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois, the writer-directors of Disney's Lilo and Stitch, took over as co-directors and it was altered.
Ultimately, if everybody wanted a father-son story, then that's what had to rise up to the top. And it wasn't rising up because it was buried under mysticism and prophecies and Nordic legends.
The original plot was described as heavily loyal to the book, but was regarded as being too sweet and whimsical, as well as geared towards too young of a demographic, according to Baruchel.
In the novel, Hiccup's dragon Toothless is a common or garden dragon, a small breed. In the film, Toothless is a night fury, the rarest of all dragons, and is large enough to serve as a flying mount for both Hiccup and Astrid.
Thank you for nothing, you useless reptile.
The filmmakers hired cinematographer Roger Deakins, known for frequently collaborating with the Coen brothers, as a visual consultant to help them with lighting and overall look of the film and to add a live-action feel.
Extensive research was done to depict both flight and fire, as the directors knew that they would be the biggest draw of the film's 3D effects.
For fire, given animation could break away from the limitations seen in live-action films, where propane flames are usually used due to being easier to extinguish.
The Dragon's design team made sure to create animals that were comical and also innovative compared to other dragon fiction.
For Toothless in particular, they tried to combine various dragon traits in a Black Panther-inspired design, but also had large ears and eyes to better convey emotion.
Some of the more interesting details that we were able to uncover about the making of this film were things such as the Chihuahua that was paid $100 for the making of the movie.
That's right. The film's sound designers saw the dog on YouTube and subsequently contacted the owners to record Paco. Paco's voice was used to create the sound of the Terrible Terrors.
The very first character to appear in the film is Toothless. If you pay close attention to the opening scene, you can see him fly by in the background. It's pretty subtle.
It's not so subtle.
Most of the sounds that Toothless makes throughout the movie were created by using a combination of sounds including house cats, elephants, tigers, elephant seals, and horses.
There's also a drawing on Hiccup's wall that resembles the time-traveling flux capacitor, a nod to the Back to the Future film franchise.
Because of the involvement of the directors from Lilo and Stitch, it's easy to see that Toothless was modeled after Stitch.
In the film, Gobber has 14 different hand attachments, and that number just keeps on climbing as sequels get released.
In the scene where Hiccup stretches his hand out to Toothless, the reaction that Toothless has was actually a mistake created during the animation process.
But the filmmakers thought that it looked good and it felt appropriate and decided to leave it in the film.
And speaking of the filmmakers, did you know that if it wasn't for Pixar, How to Train Your Dragon would probably have never come into being?
That's right. When Disney acquired Pixar in 2006, it installed Pixar head John Lasseter as the chief executive officer at Pixar.
As well as Walt Disney Animation, Disney Toon Studios, and principal creative advisor at Disney Imagineering, where the directors Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois were employed.
Lasseter, who was not a big fan of Lilo and Stitch because he thought that it was the exact opposite of what a good film should be with his story-first mandate, promptly fired the two directors shortly after taking up his position.
You are fired!
Which meant that Sanders and DeBlois were able to get scooped up by DreamWorks Animation and start working on How to Train Your Dragon.
That was a $500 million mistake, Johnny.
You done fucked it up!
How to Train Your Dragon has since spiraled into a mega franchise spawning sequels, the third of which is scheduled for theaters early next year.
Other properties spawned from the original film include short films, a television series, video games, an array of toys, and a very elaborate and entertaining arena show.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
A heartfelt thank you to all our wonderful patrons who continue to support us through Patreon.
If you would like to help support us and would like to see this channel grow, you can click the Patreon link down below and support us for as little as $1 a month.
Thank you to everyone who continues to watch, like, share, and subscribe.
What was your favorite film in the franchise?
Who's your favorite dragon?
Let us know in the comments down below.
Thank you.
We love you.
Good night.
Not so fireproof on the inside, are you?